So with ChatGPT and AI and deepfake technology, all this stuff in the news right now and being tried out by everyone, it's against out of this conversation of the threat of AI and robotics. Will it lead to the collapse of civilization? Should we be worried? Should we be putting a stop to this? I think people are maybe looking at this the wrong way and missing some of the deeper trends that are at play here. And there's good reasons for that. But there are deeper trends at play in technological innovation right now that can paradoxically kind of empower a reactionary worldview or a reactionary element. So let me get into it, right? So is AI a threat to civilization? I would say yes, but not for the reasons you think, right? This idea of the Terminator, this sci-fi idea of self-conscious robots, artificial intelligence, I think is nonsense. I've talked about this before, but the whole idea that past a certain level of complexity, computers would become conscious is just absurd to me. I mean, no one assumes that a computer, no matter how complex it is conscious, or a smartphone. No one assumes that there's even some very primitive level of awareness there. And yet we think that eventually, somehow, if the circuitry becomes complex enough, silicon will become conscious. And this is never really explained how, but we use this metaphor of the mind as a computer, and then we think, well, a computer can be a mind. And it's all really just a big sort of confusion of category errors. And what's called artificial intelligence really isn't anything like intelligence. It's nothing like human intelligence, right? It's still input and output. It's still feeding you back information that already exists within it, based on your input, based on what someone else has programmed it to do. So, functionally, ChatGPT is no different from Google search. It's basically a very complex search algorithm or something like predictive text. But we get fooled by the sense of having a conversation with this, that there's some kind of agency there. So I'm not at all concerned really about a Terminator scenario or computers, turning on us or developing some kind of intentionality or agency. I think that's just a total misunderstanding of the mind and of consciousness. But when we accept that, we can look at this and what is this really? This is a tool. This is a technological tool that people can use that is empowering people right now to do things that they couldn't do previously. And so with technology, with technological development, it's always just a question of who it empowers, what it does to power dynamics. And political forms are really shaped by technology, and military technology specifically. And tech tends to be either centralizing or decentralizing in its effects. And it seems to me that all of the technological innovations we're seeing right now are massively decentralizing. They're massively in favor of disintermediation, which is a big word, but it basically just means, it's this kind of theory cell, collapsitarian term that gets thrown around. But, you have forms of intermediation. It's basically middlemen. You have a lot of this in complex society, right? You have a lot of bureaucracy that kind of builds on top of itself, a lot of sort of bullshit jobs. Disintermediation is just a process of doing away with that and, allowing sort of a direct line between people without these middlemen. And technology right now is massively disrupting traditional industries, traditional forms of intermediation, and allowing this process to happen. You think of a simple example like email. Massively disintermediated mail. Right now you don't need a postman and a post office to send mail. You don't need to pay a postage stamp and give money to the government. You don't need this huge centralized bureaucracy to manage all this. You just have the internet and you just click and it goes to the person you want it to. But if you think of like the platform capitalism of the last decade, the big technological innovations that have been very successful, what is Uber? Uber is just an algorithm that connects people. It just connects people that want to ride with people that are willing to give them a ride. What is Airbnb? Airbnb is just a platform for people that want to rent somewhere to connect with people that want to rent out a room. So a lot of these big companies, they don't really own anything, they don't have any stock, yet they're worth, in some cases, billions of dollars. Where is the value? The value is simply that they have a disintermediating technology. And this seems to be the trend of all of this tech. I mean, the trend of tech generally is like it's developed by the military or by big government. You know, the libertarian idea of technological and business innovation is really wrong. If you look at the big innovations, generally the tendency is like there's a big bureaucracy behind it. There's a lot of government funding. You know, this idea that any innovation comes from like individuals in the private sectors and government is totally inefficient. Well, you know, government has a lot of success stories in terms of industry. You know, take the internet, right? Take your smartphone, you know, it's using satellite technology that was developed by the US military that Bill Clinton decreed should be allowed for civilian usage in the mid-90s. Your phone probably has a lithium-ion battery that the Department of Energy gave funding to develop. Like I said, the internet developed by DARPA. So the trend of all of these things is they're developed by military research and development, pass on to the private sector, and you know, generally some sort of friends of the deep state military industrial complex can make a lot of money in the private sector selling these things as marketable products. And then the information, the patents and how to develop this stuff becomes diffused, and you know, it's mass produced in China for very cheap and everyone has access to it, and now, you know, everyone has access to a smartphone and the internet. That's the trend of all of these technologies. That's what I think the trend is going to be of AI as well. You know, people will say, oh, well, if they're giving us ChatGPT, imagine what they're hiding from us, imagine what the military has. And that may be true to an extent, but I do think, you know, within a few years, all of this stuff will be out there. It'll be decentralized, it'll be open source, it'll be available for everyone to use. And so the real question, when we know, you know, this stuff is a tool, is who does it empower and how? And, you know, let's go through it, right? Something like AI, really, and ChatGPT and like the ability to use AI to develop graphics and music and all this stuff, it really gives power to the individual. It gives power to people that are outside the institutions, that don't have a lot of funding or corporate backing or access to infrastructure. So it's possibly potentially empowering people that, you know, the regime don't want to have empowered, because this stuff was already, there was already a certain level of access, but a big differential in terms of someone's financial status and how they could access this. Another thing you can see it doing is wearing away the value of traditional institutions and forms of prestige. The obvious example is, you know, people are using AI apps now to write entire college essays that provide them with sources, citations, bibliography, and won't be detected as any form of plagiarism or be detected as being an AI. You know, I used to do some college essays for people for money, so that's one career that's going to be wiped out by this now. But what does that do for college degrees? What does that do for, what value is your English literature degree when anyone can get straight A's in it using a simple AI app that they can download for free? So a lot of these kind of traditional institutions, suddenly when everyone has access to very complex algorithms at their fingertips, what's the value of this stuff going to be? It seems to me things are going to tend away from these kind of prestige institutions and degrees and back towards like individual talent, industriousness, intelligence, which itself, those kinds of people, industrious, entrepreneurial, intelligent people, will be empowered by this stuff. You know, people that want to do their own sort of code and their own sort of graphic design, you know, they have the equivalent of like a massive team of people and massive money's worth of technology to empower them now. So it seems to me that's really taken away from those institutions. And then you think of what jobs are at risk from AI. Again, it's the jobs of sort of intermediation. It's things like accountancy, like corporate law, all these kind of middle management, bureaucratic jobs of like, you know, writing out formalities and stuff. What jobs are least at risk from AI? Well, it's sort of traditional working class jobs, just like the plumber, the electrician. There's this paradox in robotics, which I don't think is a paradox, that basically it's very easy to program difficult stuff in a robot, stuff that's difficult for us, like what's write pi to 100 digits or win a chess game against this grandmaster. That's relatively easy to program. What's difficult to program or to get a robot to do is walk or hammer a nail in the right spot. Right, things that are easy for us, things that a child can do. Still in this battle to try and figure out how to get robots to be able to do this stuff well. And that means that, like I said, the sort of simple manual labor, the maintenance jobs, the trades are like least at risk from some of this stuff. The first ones to go will be these sort of intermediation jobs. Then as far as what it does for narrative, this is the big thing with deepfakes that people are talking about, right? There's these super realistic deepfakes. Someone can make it look like Tom Cruise is jumping off a skyscraper in Abu Dhabi, or Joe Biden is saying something really terrible. And so people look at that and they're like, well, everyone is just going to be posting fake news with deepfakes. No one is going to know what to believe. We're going to be in this weird hyper reality. And some people have taken a pessimistic conclusion from that and said, well, fact checkers are going to step in here, shut all this stuff down and say, well, there's so much fake stuff on the internet. The only ones you can really trust is like traditional journalism. Look, the internet has become this wild, wild west of fake news and hyper reality. You're gonna have to go back to, reading the New York Times, who will tell you which videos are real and which ones are fake. That's not really how I see it playing out though. Because, we've had this trend of the so-called fact checkers for years, right? Donald Trump, who's betting Hillary Clinton, made claims, and Hillary Clinton said, hey, everyone just go and read the fact checkers on this and see what they have to say about what he's saying here. Did that hurt Donald Trump, that the fact checkers were saying he was wrong? No, because people have divided into these left-right sort of silos, and they look at the fact checkers as the same sort of ideological tribe as Hillary Clinton. So yeah, there's going to be people fact checking this stuff, and people that don't want to believe the fact checkers aren't going to believe them, and they're not going to even check what they have to say anyway. So all this is really going to do is just kind of accelerate that polarization. Right, I talked before about the rise of wokeism around the early 2010s, and a big part of this was moving to paywall models for traditional media, like the New York Times, Wall Street Journal. Suddenly their business model was much more reliant on a small base of more radical users that were now subscribers. And this has really been the model of all media, is they become more of an ideological niche, and they have a niche of primarily radicals to appeal to. And that process has started to happen on the right, again because of technology. You look at Trump's election, I don't think he could have won without Twitter and YouTube and Facebook, and these kind of counter-hegemonic narratives and figures popping up. And what's happened in the last few years is, I think, conservative right-wing media, it's really tended in the direction of sort of Alex Jones, InfoWars style content. It's become very sort of conspiratorial, very reactionary in the sense of, anything that the mainstream believes, anything that liberals believe must be fake, must be a psyop. Everything is sort of 4D chess to trick you into going along with the system, this kind of thing. I think that's just going to be empowered more by the deepfake stuff, because it's not going to be possible to kind of fact check or put this stuff down at any great level. So it's going to lead to more kind of schizo stuff on the right. That stuff is going to trickle up. Those people are becoming more influential on the more popular right-wing figures. And so all it's really going to do is accelerate this process of polarization, where the left and the right are both playing to a more radical base, and there's no sort of shared, agreed upon reality where they can settle their differences. And there isn't even a shared media space that everyone is watching, where if those differences were settled, people would see it as an event, right? Everyone is off on Rumble or on the podcast or on the paywall Substack, whatever, and so technology has kind of siloed people in this way, allowed them to diverge into this kind of neurotribalism of siphoning themselves off into echo chambers with people that agree with them, with people that share their morals, that share their values, that share their way of thinking. And all technology is really doing is just empowering those communities, allowing them to have more independence, allowing them to do more and more to kind of undercut the mainstream and undercut any kind of shared reality. And so in this weird way, these technological developments, they're accelerating this process of tribalization that has a reactionary element to it, because there was this sort of monoculture, this progressivism, liberalism. What happens with this technological empowerment? You look at something like the Taliban, right? The Taliban won in Afghanistan against the US military. These are, Islamic fundamentalists, but they have smartphones, they have the internet, they have automatic weapons that they can buy for cheap. And so in a weird way, like, this technological advancement leads to a kind of retribalization. It leads to, without the intermediation, what's left is people can give their loyalty to more organic forms of loyalty, right? You can have the re-emergence of sort of old prejudices, religions, folkways. And so everything that undercuts that process of mass narrative control, mass society creation, everything that undercuts that accelerates things that are outside the sort of liberal paradigm. It accelerates forms of older forms of nationalism and religiosity and so on. So will AI, will robotics collapse civilization? Yeah, but not for the reasons you think, in that it's accelerating this process of decentralization, disintermediation, something like what happened after the fall of Rome, when again you had these small sort of principalities in the Middle Ages, or like the Bronze Age collapse, when you had these huge empires that collapsed for a variety of reasons. And technological disintermediation is something that's rapidly accelerating that now. But collapse won't look like the way people imagine, in terms of cities burning or something, but it's just a slow checking out of people from the mass narrative, from official ways of seeing things and understanding things, from traditional forms of prestige and authority, and bringing things back to much more local, much more unpredictable forms. So yeah, that's my take. If you enjoyed this, subscribe, hit the like, all that good stuff, and take care.